Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Panaman Supari Pradvikacharya Shrotar Shri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kun Radha Kunigiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamana Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Thank you all very much for being here. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadhati Shapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lolita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Pyevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome again to our Thursday night Istagosthi. To begin, I wanted to revisit the topic that I said I didn't want to spend more time on, namely the fall of the, or non-fall of the jiva. Of course, as mentioned, it's a topic that we could go on and on with, but I received a very balanced article on the topic. It was actually in my mailbox before our last Istagosthi, but I hadn't read it yet. And now I've read it, and I thought it would be worth our reading here. It came from His Holiness Dhanurdhar Maharaj. It's his Monday morning readings, number 45, and it's titled A Reasonable Question Without a Reasonable Answer. And it's such a fine, short essay that I thought, let's go with it. A natural inquiry that comes up in almost all spiritual traditions concerns the origin of the living entity being in the material world. All moksha traditions, Vedic, Buddhist, and Jain, universally profess that our condition here in ignorance is beginningless or eternal. The Judeo-Christian traditions, in contrast, profess that the material world and consequent ignorance is not eternal, but has a creative beginning point that is followed by a sort of fall theory, which begins with Adam's tumble from a position of innocence. Srila Prabhupada seems to have indicated at different times propositions that coincide more or less with either theory, although the propositions are mutually exclusive. In other words, if one is true, the other cannot be. So which is a better explanation of the origin of the conditioned soul's ignorance? From the standpoint of reason, there's no satisfactory answer to this straightforward inquiry. For rather than one position being reasonable and the other not, they are both problematic when engaged from within the parameters of human reasoning. To think that the soul has been eternally suffering for no initial causal reason on its part seems ontologically unreasonable and cruel. On the other hand, how can imperfection exist in Goloka or Brahma, as that goes against the unspoiled nature of that reality? In other words, no matter which way various theistic traditions tackle the question of the origin of the conditioned soul's ignorance, their conclusion seems to challenge a theistic or divine basis of reality. But does it? Some thoughts on this quandary. First, we need to remember that these questions on the origin of the living entity are being discussed within a cause-effect framework, where all scriptures posit that Brahman, or God, is beyond time and space, and thus the divine can only be fully known by revelation and not human reason. Similarly, the nature of his energies emanating from him, such as avidya, ignorance, can only be known by revealed scripture, because their origin is beyond the space-time cause-effect frame on which reason is based. In other words, the laws on which this world operates and upon which reason is based come from God and can thus never subject him to their parameters. So, while reason can tell us that there is an intelligence behind the creation, it is limited in talking about its intrinsic nature, such as the whys about avidya, a position clearly established by the Vedanta commentators in the very opening verses of the Vedanta Sutra. Trans-temporal and trans-spatial truths can only be revealed. Let me offer an example how inconceivability or beyond reason is a sensible conclusion when describing the ontology, the nature of creation. There are only two choices for the nature of reality. It is either eternally existing, or it came into being out of nothing. Can we possibly conceive of something that has been eternally existing, and that no matter how far back we go, ad infinitum, can still recede in time further and further, forever? Or in contrast, how are we to conceive of a reality manifesting from nothing? If we think deeply about the possible choices of the origins of this world, there's no way to fit either into our frame of cause-effect reason based on our experience in this world. As both alternatives are inconceivable, yet one must be true, we can conclude that the nature of reality, however it came into being, must be beyond our ability to fully conceive. I therefore think that when dealing theologically with quandaries concerning an ultimate origin such as the origin of ignorance, the existence of evil, the ontology of the soul, and so on, we are bound to reach a roadblock in our understanding by reason. For they are phenomena that originate in God, who is existing in an eternally present spiritual time, by necessity expressed through a language and logic based on material time. This is like trying to fit a multidimensional reality into our two-dimensional reality. The former can only be expressed by flattening the concept into the dimensions of length and breadth, and thereby losing its spatial extensiveness. I myself appreciate how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur deals with this point after discussing the ontology of the soul in terms of the locus of bhakti. He says, I've explained all this to you in words, but you can only understand their true meaning to the extent that you have realized and experienced the unalloyed spiritual realm. I have just given you a glimpse. You should try to realize the meaning of what I said through spiritual meditation, chit samadhi. You will not be able to understand these topics through mundane logic or debate. The more you can free your faculty of experience from material bondage, the more you will be able to experience the spiritual domain. And that is why some reasonable questions logically have no reasonable answer. And Maharaj ends with a quote from Srila Prabhupada, what is the use of such discussions? So whether you are in the Brahma Sayuja, the Brahma Jyoti, or with Krishna in his Leela, at the moment you are neither. So the best policy is to develop your Krishna consciousness and go there, back to Godhead. Never mind what is your origin. Addendum to a letter to Madhavisa Das, June 1972. So that's Maharaj's text. I might quibble with him on some small points, but I think his basic proposition is, and more than just the basic proposition, so much of what he said really hits the target quite well. When we try to understand things that are beyond the limits of our understanding, we are likely to fall short. All right, that's what I wanted to bring up today. We can either talk about that further or go on to something else, according to your choice.
Maharaj,
Mm-hmm.
Hare Krishna, please accept my obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I would like to read that and study it a little bit, because on the surface of it, my my quibble is that I don't know if, sorry, I'm having a headache and things come and go out of my brain. Maybe I should go back and formulate it later. I feel like saying that it's unknowable, it reminds me of what a lot of us who weren't born into Krishna consciousness or born into Prabhupada's movement said when we were just coming to Krishna consciousness. And that is that, well, I was raised a Christian or I was raised a Jew, and I had so many questions and they couldn't answer it. But when I came to Krishna consciousness, all my questions were answered.
Right.
So
right.
I for myself, and I feel like I've been wrestling with this question, not because I shouldn't say I don't have doubts. I've been wrestling with the question for at least 10 years. And when I say wrestling is that I go through periods of intensely researching everything Prabhupada said, or reminding myself, reviewing everything that I can find that Prabhupada said. And it seems that, Prabhupada's position on it is tucked in so many purports of the Bhagavatam and in the Bhagavad Gita. It's tucked in. He makes the same comments over and over again. And so for myself, and not to minimize what Maharaj has written, I really do want to read it, and I feel like it will add, but I feel like in one sense that the real answer is that everyone has to search within themselves to find out what the answer is for why they are here. Why am I here? Not why is the jiva here, but why am I here? And not in a specific kind of way that, if I was in the spiritual world, then, something happened with Krishna and boom, here I am. But to look at our own way of being and our own attitude towards Krishna and see how at every moment, if we're marginal, we're always marginal. So it's like we always have the choice. We're always choosing from one second to the next. Is it Krishna or is it Maya? Is it Krishna or is it Maya? Is it Krishna or is it Maya? So if we examine ourselves, then we see, okay, what is it in me that is choosing Maya? And that's the ultimate answer. When we figure that out and we decide, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. And we, through the process of sadhana bhakti, I think you sort of train yourself out of it, or, with the help of guru, obviously, and the Vaishnavas. But I think everyone, has to answer the question for themselves, not in an academic way, but what is it about me that is not turning to Krishna? And that answer is, is all I need, because I don't care why any other jivas here, it only really matters why I'm here, the others will figure it out in their own sweet time, but I have to figure out why I'm here. And I think, the problem is when we make it too academic, and it should be more personal.
Nice. That is, and essentially Prabhupada saying that, you may have come from here, you may have come from there, but now you're in neither place. So yeah. Let's get on with it.
Right.
Nice.
I mean, what switched it for me, I was reading Dostoevsky. I don't know if you've ever read Notes from Underground. And
I never have.
Oh, it can provoke mental illness if you're not strong-minded, because it's such a mental piece. But he talks about how you can do everything wonderful for a man. You can treat him as wonderfully and give him every advantage, and he will turn around and play a dirty trick on you just because he can, because he's a man and not an organ stop, because he has the ability to choose at every moment. So he will choose against his own best interest simply for the reason to say that I choose. And for me, it's like, yeah, I choose. And how many of us do that? We choose the wrong thing just because we can, just to assert our own wills and our own, dominance, or whatever you want to call it. But anyways, yeah. So that was a little thing. I mean, Dostoevsky's not absolute, but it triggered something in with me. Yeah, it's like, I'll do something stupid and against my own best interest just because I want to exert my own will.
There you are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Yes, good. Anything else on this, or shall we go on to some other topic? Either way, I'm open. And I wonder whether there's any thought bubbling up, any question bubbling up, as they usually do.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Until other more significant questions or comments bubble up, I had a couple of notes that I've taken in the course of our Istagosthi that I just wanted to relate to you. And this is from Anantashesha Prabhu when you were relating the history of Keshava the elephant in Guruvayur. He said to me in a private message, I come from a town near to Guruvayur, and I am shocked that Maharaj knows so much about Keshava. Everything he said was absolutely correct. I just wanted you to know that because it was a...
Well, it wasn't so shocking. That one doesn't defy reason. I went there on Padayatra in 1985 with Lokanath Maharaj and the Padayatra party. And we had darshan there, and this story was explained to us, the history. And it's a very impressive history. And still the tusks of the elephant are there before the deity room. It's not an easily forgettable history. So it's not some sort of mystical power that I have, but it's a wonderful historical incident, and within, fairly recent memory.
Another note that I found until other more significant things bubble up is that at one point you were staying at New Brindavan, and it was before one of our classes began. And this is just a curiosity satisfaction point for me. But there was an exchange that you had with the Pujari there, that he called you and you told the Pujari, in Prabhupada's time, we didn't have that. And that was the end of the conversation. It was very short. And my thought was that I couldn't see exactly what was going on, but I was wondering if it was one of those sort of helmets that people have on the altar for putting on the devotees' heads that have the deities' paduka or lotus foot imprints on the top. Or I couldn't tell what it was, but you made it very clear.
That's what it was.
Okay, all right.
Somehow this has been imported into our deity worship, although it's never been part of the Gaudiya tradition. I completely understand it when I visit a South Indian temple where this is very much a part of their practice, and I appreciate it very much. And but I'm not quite sure how this. Well, I do know, basically, this was when Lord Nrsingadev was installed in Mayapur. They essentially installed him in a South Indian bhav, shall we say. So you'll see all the altar paraphernalia is this heavy South Indian metalwork. And everything is, the fan is South Indian, everything is done in a very South Indian way, I suppose, because Nrsingadev is so much seen in South India and the Hobalam, such places. So they did everything with a South Indian bhav, and they included that item, that there's a name for it in sense. Sitari. So they included that sitari as one of the items. And so if we're worshiping Lord Nrsingadev in that South Indian mood, then okay, I get it. I would also get it if we were doing this in our South Indian temples like Tirupati or Coimbatore or any place else where it's sort of an expectation that when you take darshan, this is a blessing that you'll receive. So we're essentially keeping pace with local expectations. I don't understand, but then why that should be transferred to our Radha Krishna temples all over the world is another question. And I suppose it's a small thing. It's not, the world is not going to exist or disappear because of that. But I'm always sensitive to things that have been introduced into ISKCON without having been invited, as it were, by Srila Prabhupada. And there's so much that's comes in, and after a while, it's like, well, this is what we've always done. And Tulsi Priya says, so is that what Srila Prabhupada wanted? Is it in line with his desire that we increase our service? Or is it a kind of syncretism, a merging of different traditions, albeit within the larger Vaishnava practice of Archan? Well, it is a kind of syncretism of practice. It doesn't change the philosophy at all. But it's just a practice introduced from elsewhere. And perhaps Srila Prabhupada would have said, this is very good, and yes, we should do this. But of course, it was never introduced during his time. He might just as well have said, this is not in our line. So, and of course, we have no pictures of Srila Prabhupada appearing before London Ishara or Rukmini Dwarkadish or Krishna Balaram, and receiving this sitari, this blessing, because it was introduced after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. That's just historical, and I don't think I'd rant about it today. Anything else on that one?
Yes, Maharaj.
Except if I may, just to add something else. These things get started in places like Mayapur and Vrindavan, and then whatever gets started there is carried all over the world and taken to be the way we do things. Since today is the last day of Kartik, maybe it's the last chance to mention the recently devised custom of observing Kartik by chanting the Gopi Gita every night, which is done in Vrindavan now, and which is, I find, spreading here and there and so on. Not something started by Srila Prabhupada. And what would he say? Well, Hare Krishna. There's so many other prayers that could be chanted during Kartik. Today's last day of Bhishma Panchaka. Bhishma Dev's prayers are there. And Indradev's prayers are there, relevant to the Govardhan Lila. But no, it's Gopi Gita. And now that's all over because, well, that's what they do in Vrindavan. But it's not what they did in Vrindavan in Srila Prabhupada's time. So I'm not taking a stand on it today, but there it is. The only thing I would say is we have to be so careful about what we introduce in Vrindavan and Mayapur, because anything introduced there goes everywhere, including Jaya Pancha Tattva, which I will take a stand on. That's just nonsense. Prabhupada said we should chant the 5 names, all 5 names of the Pancha Tattva. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. That's the Pancha Tattva mantra. But because we have to say Jai somebody or other, and because it fits the da 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 da, so now we have Jaya Pancha Tattva, which again was never there in Prabhupada's time, which is not part of the Gaudiya line, which is just a fabrication. And I would be happy to see it drop off the face of the earth. The earth wouldn't miss it. Venkatesh says, yep, they're singing Gopi Gita here in Mayapur too. There's a follow-up question.
Maharaj.
From,
Yeah. What I was wondering is, I remember reading, and obviously I wasn't there, so I'm speaking from somebody else's memory, but I remember reading Prabhupada said something like, my Guru Maharaj wanted me to preach in the Western countries. That I have done. Now I want to preach in India.
yes.
And I feel like changes are always happening in ISKCON. We cannot stop them. They're going on. And I know, well, one way of dealing with it that I just came to my mind, and maybe there's already a process for that with the GBC, but I'm thinking of the Amish, before they would introduce any new technology, the elders amongst the Amish would just, get together and it's like, okay, how is this going to affect our community? And they would make their decision on that. Refrigerators are okay, automobiles are not okay, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But there's a tendency, we've been given a legacy, and you are the first, you are in the generation of those who received the legacy from Prabhupada, who received it from his spiritual master. I'm in the next generation down. And if you receive an inheritance, somebody may tell you, I want you to spend this money on such and such, but there are limits to how much they can control what you do with that inheritance. And so how, as the inheritance keeps getting passed down and people say, okay, now the inheritance is mine, how is there some way for people to ascertain if they do make changes with what they've received, or if they do expand it in ways that haven't been done before? Is there maybe like a sort of, what's the word, a rubric for deciding when to change something and when not to change something, because it's obvious it doesn't stay the same?
True. This is something that's going to be discussed for generations and generations. The Burijan Prabhu sent me something very interesting. I don't know if I brought it up about the Buddhists. The essence of it was that there's the Hinayana Buddhist school and the Mahayana Buddhist school. The Hinayana school basically took very seriously Lord Buddha's direction, essentially saying, Lord Buddha himself said that, you stick with it and struggle and you'll get there. And so they very strictly follow that. And the Mahayana school took a different tack. They became accommodating of various, what would you say? They became more inclusive. The Hinayana people didn't care whether masses of people joined. They wanted to keep it pure and people could join or not. And the Mahayana people wanted to extend Lord Buddha's teaching to everyone. And so they accommodated a lot and they loosened up a lot. And there was a very salient point made by a Buddhist scholar dealing with the topic. Let's see if I can get it for you very fast. I know. No, I don't know. Yes, I do know. Let's see where I will find that. Yeah. Oh my goodness, so many pages. But let me see if I can catch the essence of it. Uh, hmm. Yeah, as the fold of Buddhism widened, this is because of Mahayana, it came to include not only the few select persons uh, fit to follow the difficult ideal, but also uh, under also the half-convinced nominal converts who neither understood the path nor had the necessary moral strength to follow it. With the support of royal patrons like Ashoka, Buddhism gained in number but lost its original quality. The bulk of people who accepted Buddhism on grounds other than moral brought it down to their own level. They came with their own habits, beliefs, and traditions, which soon became a part of the new faith they accepted. The teachers had to choose between upholding the ideal at the cost of number and upholding the number at the cost of the ideal. A few sturdy ones preferred the first, but the majority could not resist the temptation of the second. So I think we see similar forces at work, and we'll see similar forces at work over time. But to make a grumpy Hinayana comment, no postman ever got shot for failing to add something new to a letter. It's not a fault of the postman if he leaves the letter as it is and just delivers it. And Srila Prabhupada emphasized that very strongly. It's hard for me, I can think of many instances where Srila Prabhupada spoke very strongly against, why are they inventing, why are they concocting, who has told them to do this, where have they gotten this idea? Examples abound. But it's really hard to find an example where Srila Prabhupada says they're not being creative enough. They're not sufficiently innovative. Don't they have any new ideas? Some other thoughts, comments, contributions, questions?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. On that same topic, or on a similar topic, Ravindra Suraprabhu often tells a story that I believe he witnessed. He was with Prabhupada in Mayapur, and the devotees were showing Prabhupada a photographs of some performance that was done in the temple. Maybe it was in
New Dwarka.
New Dwarka, yeah. And Prabhupada noticed right away, why are the backs to the deities? And there was some discussion back and forth. Well, it was logistically necessary so that the performers could be seen. And no, why are the backs to the deities? Rupa Goswami says the backs should not be to the deities. Oh, and then someone brought up the point. Well, Jayatirtha said, oh, Jayatirtha, Rupa Goswami has said not to put the backs to the deities, but now Jayatirtha has become such big acharya. And he said, that is the problem with this ISKCON movement. So many big acharyas call all the GBC, and then everyone was schooled down to the man of what needed to be done and what ought not to have been done. So I'm just wondering if that sort of thing persists.
There's always a tension between wanting to expand and reach out and wanting to keep the essence of what we've been given. And on the one side, if we just try to keep everything exactly the same, we may not be effective because places are different, people are different. You could never spread Krishna consciousness in a place like Iran, for example, by saying, well, Prabhupada sat down in the park and just chanted the holy name. Why can't we do that here? You have to adapt or suffer the consequences. And yet, just I envision a whole tribe of what shall we say, of people from the anything goes camp, waving the banner of time, place, and circumstance, the banner that justifies essentially anything. So it requires careful thought. On the one side, you don't want to be just external formalists who keep the outer form of things, but can't transmit the essence of things. And on the other side, you don't want to just sacrifice everything in the name of shedding formalism. Whichever way you go, the essence has to be maintained. That we can all agree on. That the outer side might change, but the essential teaching should not change. But again, how one does this is I suspect someone says, just let's see who said it. Panchatattva. I suspect that if someone is seriously reading Srila Prabhupada's books daily and discussing them in the association of pure devotees, he or she will be fairly careful not to concoct or fall victim to concoction. Nice. And Tulsi Priya says we have to constantly weigh one value against another in service to the essence. And Kamalini has her hand up.
Okay. Yeah. There's the echo. So it's, very good points. One thing about Srila Prabhupada, when he started ISKCON, since you were there in the very beginning, he didn't come here with the rigid program, like the same as the Gaudiya Math or the same as he had been practicing in the Gaudiya Math. And he adapted, didn't he? And I remember remember in San Francisco when the devotees, they were having kirtan in the temple, and then they went up to outside of Prabhupada's apartment. And, he went like this, that means come here, but they thought it means go away. And then and then the servant ran down and said, no, Prabhupada said to come up. He wants to see you. And so he said, you should do this every day, go out on the streets like this and bring this chanting, go like they weren't instructed. They did go to the park and all, but so many things expanded from an experience, just like book distribution, right? The devotees did distribute magazines, and then one devotee traded gas for a big Krishna book. Wow, we can actually distribute big books. And now what to speak of distributing sets of Srimad Bhagavatam on the street. So many things evolve over time. And like you say, it's not at all compromising, but rather only increasing the basic standards and the basic programs, it seems to me. Of course, we can have Hridayananda Maharaj here, and he has a whole other, another outlook of how we're stifling the spreading of Krishna consciousness by being so rigidly, doing things this way. Anyway, and of course, our second generation, it's a whole new mentality, and it's not going to go away. And like you say, times change and mentalities change, and we have to learn that to be, be able to not compromise, and at the same time give breathing room for expansion. But as you're already saying, but just a thought anyway. But
Yeah, good, all good points. All good points. Srila Prabhupada, in another conversation that's relevant, there was a time when BTG was getting pretty loose and publishing sort of watered down content. And part of it was this sort of inside front page of testimonials from ordinary people about chanting. And someone said, I feel so much better since I began chanting. And someone else said, my friend says, that you seem so much happier. And it's all happened since I began chanting. I get along with people better, all this kind of stuff. I'm more effective at work since I've started chanting. So some devotees complained to Srila Prabhupada about it, and Srila Prabhupada had a discussion with the person in charge at the time. And he was saying, that we want to get people to chant. And when you first came, you didn't make any restrictions. You just asked people to chant. And so that's what the editors are trying to do. And Prabhupada said yes. He said, but they have to come to the process. That was the point that he made. And as many times as the devotee he was speaking with was explaining that, we want to get people to chant and we don't want to put any boundaries, Prabhupada was again saying, but they have to come to the process. And he said, unless they come to the process, then it will become namaparad. Then it will become namaparad. So I thought that was relevant. And particularly at the same time, in the sort of the same circle, there was a famous, the wife of a famous jazz musician who had taken up chanting, Govinda Jaya Jaya and Hare Krishna. But because she didn't come to the process, then later it wasn't clear whether she was also Krishna, or things were quite not to the point. So as Prabhupada said, it became Namaparad because she didn't come to the process. So that was Prabhupada's point, that somehow one has to come to the process. Lakshmana says, en Colombia hace unos años los devotos empezaron a Food for Life, pero en diciembre están llevando regalos de Navidad. Pienso que eso se sale de la idea inicial. In Colombia, for some years ago, the devotees began a Food for Life program, but in December, now they're bringing gifts, bringing Christmas gifts. I guess that's, yeah, I think this departs from the initial idea. Yeah, I would even argue that Food for Life departs from the initial idea. There are people who are not very happy with me for that. And that's I've given a whole seminar on the topic, infamously titled Food for Death. The theme being that Srila Prabhupada was so careful to distinguish us, what we do, from ordinary philanthropic activity. And although he did want us to distribute prasadam vigorously, it was within the context of our other Krishna conscious activities. Prasadam distribution along with kirtan, prasadam distribution at our temples, so that people would get darshan and pravachan and books and prasad. But now in various places, it's been that we cook up a big pot of biryani and drop it off at a school somewhere, and that's it. And then we advertise that we're feeding lakhs and crores of hungry students and keeping them in school, which of course is very important. So is that what Prabhupada had in mind? It appears from his instructions that it's not. And yet it's so entrenched now that if you say, well, Prabhupada didn't start Food for Life, he didn't. The program, in fact, was started at the suggestion of the Los Angeles branch of Hill and Knowlton, who in the anti-cult days, when we were seriously under attack, were called in to help us. What can we do to dispel this image of us as an evil cult? So they did a sort of an audit of Krishna consciousness, what it is that our movement does. And they decided that the best thing about our movement was the food. And the more we could emphasize food and the activities we have, especially giving out food, that would be the better that would serve to help our image. And it was in the wake of that suggestion that Food for Life was created. This isn't to fault that, because those were difficult days, and we really were being dragged through the mud. But that's the history. It's not that Prabhupada said you should start a Food for Life program. Hill and Knowlton suggested it. To hiring a consultant to change our image, was that a mistake? It seems like a slippery slope. I wouldn't call it a mistake. I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I might have issues with what we took from the consultants and how we implemented it, particularly once the emergency was over. Just anecdotally, by the way, I was there in Los Angeles when the Hill and Knowlton, the two fellows from Hill and Knowlton sort of reported their results to the interested devotees. And they were sort of, I don't know what to say. They're the sort of people that those of us from New York wouldn't give a lot of credence to. But anyway, I asked them, I said, you've studied our movement now. You've seen our books. You've been with the devotees. What would you say is our message? What is it that we're trying to get across to people? And they sort of looked at one another. And then the braver of the two spoke up and said, I'd say it's love. I guess he understood that our goal was to distribute Krishna Prema following in the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or perhaps not. Anyway, that's the anecdote. In any case, we have a grave responsibility to be handled very carefully. Srila Prabhupada has given us the message of Krishna consciousness, the culture of Krishna consciousness, the principles of Krishna consciousness, the programs of Krishna consciousness. And having received such carefully preserved and transmitted gifts, we need to be very thoughtful about how we transmit, how we understand and how we transmit what Srila Prabhupada gave us. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, we are at 8 o'clock on November 18th, 2021, the last day of the month of Kartik. So may thoughts of Krishna, who performed his pastimes as Damodar, be always with us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Gurudev. Thank you, Gurudev.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hi, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada. Thank you
Jai
for bringing
Prabhupada.
it to Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.